Hi, and welcome to the Bootleg Book Club. I'm Sam.
And I'm Felicia.
Our pick for today is Like Water for Hot Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. So, Laura is a Mexican novelist, screenwriter, and politician. She actually served on the legislature of the Mexican Congress in the Chamber of Deputies for the Morena Party from 2015 to 2018. Her first novel, which was Like Water for Chocolate, became a bestseller in Mexico and the United States and was later developed into an award-winning film. She is the third of four children. She was trained as a teacher, and she founded a children's theater workshop and wrote and produced dramas for children. She first married actor, producer, and director Alfonso Aro, with whom she collaborated on several films. And her present husband, they both live in Mexico City today. So to jump right into our book look, where we talk about the cover, it's actually really funny because I definitely chose this book based on the cover. This book happened to be at one of those Books A Million sales where like they might have like sale shelves like either right outside or right like really close to their entrance, where they had books for like either $3, $5, $7, that kind of thing. And so I chose this book a couple years ago just by the cover. I just thought it looked interesting and cool. Like I could tell there was like a familial element, a cultural element to it. And so I really gravitated towards it and knew I wanted to read it. Unfortunately, it took me a couple of years to read it, but it all worked out because, obviously we're doing this podcast now,
right.
And it's helping us kind of fall back in love with reading and get back to some of the books that might have been on our TBR or to be read list. And it was a perfect month for this book because it's National Culinary Arts Month. And when we were thinking about a book to pick, I was like, oh, I have the perfect book, because I remembered that this book was like a mix of recipes as well as like a love story, basically.
Yes.
So, and in addition to that, the book is, I think, a quick read. It took me like 2 days, and it's only about 250-ish pages.
Yeah, it is a quick read. It took me a couple more days just because I had to take a lot of breaks from after reading so much. It's like romance, drama. I didn't have that cover. It was a book that came out like in the 1990s.
Yeah, this came out and actually was initially published like at the end of the 80s, like I want to say 89, but in Mexico. But I think the English version was published in the early 90s.
Okay, yeah. So mine is actually kind of like a student version, actually.
Okay.
So it's a book that's been, when I was looking it up too, it's been in a lot of classrooms, so my cover looked a bit different. So this is beautiful though. What I did have to say, just for like the book look, I think inside of it, the structure of how you see the recipes or the recipe instructions interwoven into the actual book, it seemed like the book alone is a beautiful art form,
right?
Not just the cover. It's like even in between each page and word,
right? So going into the bookmark where we talk about like our favorite quotes, I think I did very good this book. I only have 2 quotes.
Oh, that's perfect.
So my first one is on page 115, and there is a doctor who is telling the main character, Tita, a theory he has about bodies and souls. My grandmother had a very interesting theory. She said that each of us is born with a box of matches inside of us. But we can't strike them all by ourselves. Just as in the experiment, we need oxygen and a candle to help. In this case, the oxygen, for example, would come from the breath of the person you love. The candle could be any kind of food, music, caress, word, or sound that engenders the explosion that lights one of the matches. For a moment, we are dazzled by an intense emotion. A pleasant warmth grows within us, fading slowly as time goes by until a new explosion comes along to revive it. Each person has to discover what will set off those explosions in order to live. since the combustion that occurs when one of them is ignited is what nourishes the soul. That fire, in short, is its food. And then, really quickly, I just thought that was such a beautiful way to express love and like being ignited by someone. I just was like, oh, this is like a really beautiful metaphor. And then there's another part where basically Tita, the main character, has stopped speaking. And she's asked why she doesn't want to speak. And she's asked to like write it down, you know. And they go to look what she wrote. And it says, because I don't want to. With those words, Tita had taken her first step toward freedom. And I felt like, yes, that's freedom is doing what I want to do. And if I don't feel like it, that's it. And I feel like for so long, the main character, Tita, did not have freedom. And she was not able to make her own decisions. And in that moment, it was like, this is like her first true decision that she made for herself.
Right. So for me and my bookmarks, I had the same one as you. And I want to finish the last line here where it says, if one doesn't find out in time what will set off these explosions, the box of matches dampens and not a single match will ever be light. I thought that was really interesting too, where it puts kind of, this is a metaphor about love and finding your partner or just finding your passions in the world. And I think it comes to, in his point of view and his upbringing, love is about feeling that emotion and that something's ignited, but also something that you think about and something that you do process and something that you have to actually look for. And in contrast, it goes to my other quote, where I didn't really like this quote, but it just made me think about this whole setup about love in the book, where this is from Pedro, the other kind of love interest in the book. And he's kind of saying, you don't have to think about love. You either feel it or you don't. And I kind of felt that if you did think about love, you wouldn't have all these issues that you're having now with it. It's not just feeling it. So I think when the other quote attaches that idea of you need to find that person, it's like, how do you find that person? It's something you do have to think about and kind of sit in. It's a mixture of. And I think Pedro has these immediate thoughts of just feelings without any questioning of how does that impact or affect others.
So I think we can both agree that we appreciate John's approach to love, the doctor's approach to love, than Pedro's.
Yes.
Which is a really good segue into our POV section, in which we talk about our favorite and least favorite characters. My favorite character was John.
Yes. I like Dr. Brown. My other character, before spoilers, would be Nacha.
I also appreciated Nacha. I thought she also played a special role up until the end. I don't want to spoil it, but up until the end, I thought she played a special role.
Yes. Least favorite would be Pedro and Mama Elena.
Least favorite was everybody. Besides John and Nacha. And sorry, let me actually...
How about the oldest sister?
No, I don't like her either.
Okay. I kind of liked her.
I'll tell you why I didn't like her in the deep dive. It's a very quick thing, but I feel like it is something that would probably give away.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody, child.
Okay.
I started to write out Pedro, Tita, Mama Elena, and then I was like, basically everybody else.
Yeah.
So
that is fair.
Yeah.
And to get into it, we need to head to the deep dive real quick.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. So we are going to go right into the deep dive, which is the portion in which we go into spoilers and we give away little specific details. And so if you haven't read the book, you probably want to hold on before listening to this part. Or you can, if you have read the book or watched the movie, go ahead and keep on listening for our in-depth thoughts.
Yes.
Okay. My notes. Pedro is a menace.
Oh, yes. But even before your notes, just a quick book description. This is, we mentioned about a bit before, but it is about Tita, who is the youngest child in her family, and she is tasked with this tradition. This is like early in Mexico, from like the Mexican Revolution Wars going on right now, where she needs to stay home, not be married, and take care of her mom.
Yes, which I should have looked this up. This tradition of the youngest daughter basically takes care of the mother until the mother passes away. And so the youngest daughter cannot get married.
Yes.
Do you know if this is like an actual thing or if it was made for the book?
I didn't look it up, not in that depth, but I think that I forgot about that detail. It's until the mother dies. Yes. It's not even like you're burdened with this and you can live your life. No, everything is on hold until your mother has passed.
Right.
So, which brings into why Pedro is a menace.
Right. So Pedro is a menace. Thank you for doing the book description because I was ready to just jump right into my feelings. But yes, so Pedro is a menace. Pedro falls in love with Tita, who, Felicia mentioned, is the youngest daughter, so she cannot get married. He falls in love with her, comes to ask for her hand in marriage, and the mother, Mama Elena, is completely against this. Refuses this. But Pedro agrees to marry the middle sister, and he says he will agree to marry her so that at least he will always be able to be close to Tita. How is that not a menace? Like, child,
yeah.
What are you doing? Like, what are you really doing?
And I think he's having this conversation with his dad, and his dad said, this is not right. And he's just like, this is a dedication to my love. And it's just like, no. And what becomes also annoying, where you might dislike Tita, is I think she kind of just stands for it. Like, yes, she's in love with Pedro too.
She's in love with Pedro too. So, and she accepts this idea that at least she'll be close to him. And they are okay with, like, stealing moments every now and then.
Right.
And up until the point in which there is some back and forth. Like, there's, like, multiple different things that happen. But up until, like, till the end of the book, they have this love for each other and, like, eventually come to this agreement that as long as the middle sister is not embarrassed in some way, they will continue to carry out an affair, basically.
Right.
Behind closed doors.
Total disregard for the sister and for so many other things that causes pain in Tita's life.
Right. I will say it was interesting to me that whatever Tita was feeling kind of transferred to the food.
Yes.
And I saw in that, like, there was, like, some magical realism, which you taught me that a phrase and that word, so I appreciate that. Because for me, a lot of times when I'm reading and I'm like, okay, is this a book set in reality or in the paranormal? Or, like, a lot of times I feel like, can a book choose if it's fantasy or if it's, like, set in real life? But you taught me
one or the other.
I typically want one or the other. I feel like there are very few people who can really do a good job of that. And I tend to, like, struggle with keeping up with the narrative when it happens too often. But I did think it was interesting that, like, this is a cookbook and Tita is so enveloped in cooking that it truly does affect other people if there's an element of her that goes into the food.
Yes, her emotions. If she feels really happy, then other people might feel happy.
Except for her mother.
Yes, her mother is just
immune.
Like, yes. But yeah, you're right. That magic in the book, it kind of reminded me a lot, and I wonder if you got inspiration from this, of Encanto. That I think that's another easy way to adjust to magic realism or kind of historical fiction almost, where there's spirits or ghosts start popping up.
Right.
And then all these, the food itself is like magic. So, yes.
Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting component of the book. I
really liked, though, again, how food is interwoven and it becomes a big part. Because I think Tita gets to experience a lot of things. It's like she was always meant for the kitchen, right? In a beautiful way, though. It's like her birth. She was birthed in the kitchen. And then I think the only thing it was, she tried to involve her sisters to come in the kitchen, and there was like something bad happened, and she gets beaten for that practically. And you get that sense
Mama Elena was definitely abusive.
Yeah, she was abusive, physically, emotionally, all of that. But you get this sense that cooking and the kitchen becomes her safe haven, and that's where you meet Nacha, and she's her mother, her real mom, right? Who does nurture her and teaches her all these elements. And you get that throughout the book and part of the ending, where it's like, now you have this cookbook that is Tita's life.
Right. I will say I felt like there was a generational denial of love. Like, it was passed on generation by generation, where they were not allowed to be with their one true love, I think is what was happening. Because we find out that something similar happened to Mama Elena, and that's happened to Tita now, and that's kind of like the story of this. I find, for me though, what was difficult was like, I mean, I guess this was to show how deep their love was, but I felt like I was waiting for Tita to get over that and realize her talents and her gifts and get over it and end up being with John the doctor. Like, I was like, oh, this is her redemption. Like, this is her chance to like get away from the clasp of Pedro and Mama Elena and all of that stuff. Yes. And I felt like John was doing everything he could to like nurse her spirit back to health.
Yes. Especially they're at like a family ranch, and it seems like that location itself and that connection to Mama Elena, it's like that is their cage, their prison. And the older sister kind of escapes that, and she gets her liberation in the end. And
let me say why I don't like her. Because I was happy for her to receive her liberation and all that stuff, but when she comes back and she joins the revolution basically, and when she comes back she brings troops with her. Didn't like that she, like, Tita is going through some emotional hardship, and all she's thinking about is her fritters, her crema fritters.
Right.
And I was like, girl, like, you've been gone for how long? And I guess I understood it. Like, she wanted a piece of home with her. But also I was like, be there for your sister, okay? It's time.
No, I still like her, though. I think she not only brings back the troops, but she becomes part of it, right? So I think there was a part where she was kind of scorned by Mama Elena because they hear that she was in a brothel. So from from being taken, which wasn't really taken, I guess, but to the brothel, to this, she's kind of in her own space of confinement. She's found her freedom. So I think that's what I do value in that kind of learning curve. But
I wanted to say one quick thing. We often talk about what was our favorite part of the book, and Chencha, when Chencha brings the oxtail soup to Tita, and it kind of revives Tita in a way, and she begins to talk again and cook again and all of that. I thought that was truly, truly beautiful, but what was heartbreaking was that there was, immediately after that, basically, she experiences sexual assault, and the mother becomes paralyzed. Right. And I just felt like that happened. I will say this book definitely kept you intrigued, because like you kind of went from highs to lows. Like you thought, like maybe these people do have a chance to be happy, and then kind of you would have kind of a low again.
Yes, and during that time, that's kind of what brings Tita back to the ranch, right?
After we thought she was gonna be able to escape, be able to fall in love with John, and all of that.
But she was kind of, her escape also wasn't something on good terms per se, where it was Mama Elena who was sending her away to go to I'm gonna say this wrong, in Salem, basically, and Dr. Brown is supposed to take her. And that's when you also see magic realism, where I think it's not just him, it's also like his whole family or kind of half of his family is good, she starts seeing these like images of a woman during her healing process, and she doesn't get who the woman is and what's going on. It ends up being Dr. Brown's grandmother, who like has all these
Native
natural
American. She has Native American lineage, and she had kind of become the healer of the family.
Yes, so she has natural remedies.
Yeah, she had natural remedies to offer, and John uses a mixture of natural, as a doctor, uses a mixture of natural remedies as well as modern medicine for that time.
Yes.
To like heal Tita as well.
That's something that was like one of my favorite parts. So seeing her coming back to the ranch was so disheartening.
It was really, really disheartening.
Yeah.
I have to say as well. So we've talked about, what we really enjoyed, what was difficult to read. We've talked about some of the themes such as difficult family dynamics. It does include romance, does include magical realism.
Yes.
Before we keep going, I did want to say I always like when I find in the book why the book is titled something. And in this book, that happens on page... That happened for us in Charming as a Verb, and it did make things click for me, and it's happened here as well.
Yes.
And on page 151, I'm trying to get there. Okay, that's not. Okay, page 151. Tita was literally like water for chocolate. She was on the verge of boiling over how irritable she was. And I think this just underscored how Tita's emotions kind of always go back to food, right?
Yeah.
There's always a comparison to food. And she was boiling mad in this section of the book. But it kind of just reinforced that point that everything kind of goes back to food for her, and like her emotions and how like they are all interwoven. And I do think the book did a good job of weaving through this like food metaphor. I really appreciated that.
Yes. Even with that of how to cook, in the beginning and kind of towards the end, you get this with the narrator of the book who connects everything. The narrator talks about how they have an issue with tears when they're cutting an onion, just like Tita did. And that's from the very beginning. You kind of get this sense of cooking and getting this. And the remedy was like sticking an onion on your head, I think.
Yeah.
You get these from the very beginning, this sense of how much these cooking traditions are important.
Right.
So along with that for the title.
So, are there any other themes you want to discuss before going into the writing wish?
Nope. It will be prevalent in the writing wish.
My writing wish. Tita, why didn't you end up with John?
Yes.
Why did you go back to Pedro?
Yes.
And why did you give your life, basically, to Pedro?
Yes, I hated that ending. I was very confused by it, too.
I was confused, too. I was 100% confused. I will let you finish. I will tell you where I was. I'm going to find where I was confused and let you finish.
I thought we were getting to, she was about to marry John.
Yes,
and
there's a
I was
part.
so confused on where we flipped. How did we end up in this other wedding? Why was this not her wedding? And then it was just that whole switch and flip was very confusing to me. I was trying to look that up and figure out if that was just like the actual book style versus, I know that this, you mentioned it, this book was published in Spanish originally and it's been translated to English. So I was wondering if something there happened, and it's just, I don't know. I didn't like that. I just wanted that to be cleaned up and for the ending to just not have happened.
This is when I started getting confused. At home in his bathroom, John was washing his hands, dead tired. His fingernails hurt from peeling so many nuts. Getting ready for bed, he was filled with intense emotion. In a few hours, he would be closer to Tita, and that gave him enormous satisfaction. The wedding was scheduled for midday. Are you not getting married to Tita?
Right.
Okay.
Because he had already proposed and everything. That's what... Whew. This book was a trip.
Pedro, on the other hand, could not get to sleep. A terrible jealousy gnawed at his entrails. He didn't care at all for the idea of going to the wedding and having to endure seeing Tita together with John. Are they not? Is Tita not marrying John? Next thing I know, the middle sister, I've been avoiding saying her name, but Rosario, I believe her name is dead.
Yeah. That happened too, right?
Next thing I know, it is Esperanza's wedding. Esperanza is the daughter of Pedro and the middle sister Rosario, which I actually did like that in a sense of they've broken this generational curse.
Yes, because she's the youngest.
I mean, well, she's the only child at this point because she had an older brother who passed away, unfortunately. But yeah, so she was going to be expected to take care of her mother. So her mother's dead, so she is getting married. So they, in a sense, they've broken that kind of generational tradition and curse and expectation. Okay. That's fine. It's her wedding. Next thing I know, Pedro and Tita are in arms together.
Yes.
Enveloped lovingly.
How did we get here?
Flaming flaming or lighting each other's matches. You know what I'm saying? Okay? Igniting. Okay?
Very explicit.
Yes. So I was definitely confused, definitely a little frustrated by the ending as well. And I just still feel like I can kind of see that maybe one of the themes was like, when you are truly in love, when someone truly lights that match for you, it will always be that person, right. Maybe.
That would be endgame.
But I wanted Tita to end up with John.
Yeah, I don't think that was necessary. I think she could have had John. I don't know why Pedro was her true love. It just didn't make sense to me.
I agree.
But other than that, the actual writing was beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
So many metaphors, so many connections.
Beautiful
to
imagery, I would say. I agree with that 100%.
But the plot, no. Because we did a lot of spoilers, but I feel like there's even more still.
Yeah, there's more. There are some books we read where we explicitly choose not to do too much of a deep dive because we're like, there's really only one main thing that happens.
Right.
Whereas here, I feel like there are multiple different things. If you do choose to read this book, that you will feel like, oh, that's a surprise. Like, we definitely didn't give everything away.
Right.
I feel like I would recommend this book though, even though I didn't necessarily love the ending. Like, I feel like it's still the words themselves are still beautiful to read.
Yes,
I would say.
Yes. I think so too. I would recommend it. I also think that definitely want to still do more research, but it definitely seems like a lot of Mexican culture is enriched in the book.
I agree with that as well. And I think I would like to watch the movie. I think that would be a fun thing to do.
No, thank you.
No? You think it's too much?
Too much.
Dark stuff happens?
Too much dark things, yeah. And then a bit explicit. I don't know. Sometimes I can read, explicit books, but watching it, yeah.
I will say that I feel like I'm a romantic person, but I will actually admit that sometimes when I see people kissing on screen, that's it's like I don't really want to watch people kissing sometimes. Yeah. I don't know what that says about me. But anyway, overall, I think it is a good book. It is a good read, even if I didn't love the ending, like I mentioned. But I just think she's a beautiful writer. And I'm not going to say I would read her other books. I would maybe read the synopsis of her other books and then go from there to see if I would want to actually read them.
Yes.
But overall, thanks for watching. We'll have the review on our Instagram and our blog for the actual star rating. So make sure you check that out. And like I said, thanks again for watching and tuning in. We've been loving to do this podcast. Yes. And I'm just so glad that I've had this podcast to get me back into reading, because this honestly was a book that has been on my TBR for a couple of years now.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else to add?
Nothing else.
All right. Thanks again, guys. Bye.
Bye.